Hey everyone, Duke here, and welcome to my guide to Deep Stone Crypt in 15 minutes. With the weekly raid rotations this season, I thought now was a perfect time to go back to some of the older raids and create guides to refresh your memory on the mechanics if it's been a while since you've ran them, or to give you a strong base to work off of before going in for your first time. I will be teaching and helping with all of the raids as they rotate through the weekly rotator on my stream at twitch.tv/dukeiscool, so come on by if you'd like a team to learn and run with. Deep Stone Crypt has a number of top-tier legendary weapons, such as Succession and Heritage, especially with the raid-specific perk, Reconstruction. It also has a unique exotic, Eyes of Tomorrow, which has a chance to drop from the final boss. The first area isn't technically an encounter, but I think it is definitely worthwhile to go over anyway. This area is basically a big maze which leads to the Deep Stone Crypt itself. A couple things to note here. First, there's the Frostbite mechanic. Like many other debuffs in the game, this will stack up by 1 every couple seconds, and if it hits 10, it will kill you. Being inside the safety bubbles that are throughout this maze will fully protect you from the frostbite, and also slowly lower your frostbite back down to 0. The overall goal should be to go from bubble to bubble, following the path shown in the video until you make it to the very last bubble, where you can venture inside to the Deep Stone Crypt. Also, there will be enemy spawns at each of the protection bubbles. You don't necessarily have to kill these to make it through, but do note that these serve as a sort of checkpoint mechanic, as if you kill all the enemies in a given bubble, and then die going to the next bubble, you will spawn in the bubble where you just defeated all the enemies. If you don't kill them and die, you will end up spawning much further back. I find it well worth the time to move as a team and take the extra bit of time at each bubble to take down the enemies. And finally, there's a transmat option in each bubble which will instantly teleport you backwards 1 bubble in the maze. This can be helpful if either someone gets lost and you need to go back to help them, or if you're doing the Triumph where you need to bring all of the pikes to the final bubble. Do note that there is a secret chest right next to the final bubble as well, so don't forget to pick this up for some extra raid loot and any of the raid mods you may be missing. The first true encounter of Deep Stone Crypt is Crypt Security. The goal here is to bypass the security system in order to open up the 6 tubes in the room, and eventually break all 6 of them in order to complete the encounter. There are 3 rooms in this encounter: the light room, where you first come in with the raid flag, the dark room, the room that's darker, and the downstairs operator room, which is where most of the mechanics will take place. Split your team with 3 guardians in the light and dark rooms, and start the encounter by picking up the operator buff from one of the terminals. First, let's talk about these terminals. These terminals are going to be in each of the 4 encounters of the raid, and have a couple of important characteristics. First, they're all connected. What that means is that any time a buff is in one terminal, it is actually in all of the terminals and can be grabbed from any of them. We will be using this idea in order to pass buffs from room to room in both of the first 2 encounters. Second, they can only hold 1 buff at a time. So for example, if the operator buff is already in the terminal, the scanner buff cannot be passed in until someone takes the operator buff out. And third, if there are any servitors alive, which is relevant for the first and second encounters, the terminals will be unusable to either put buffs in or take buffs out. Going back to the operator buff itself, this will be used in order to shoot data pads in order to open doors and head downstairs to the downstairs room. When in this room, there's going to be a number of enemies that chase you around, but the main mechanic is the 10 data pads that will be located around the room, 5 to your left and 5 to your right when you first enter. You will need to shoot 4 of these data pads, 2 on the left side and 2 on the right side, in order to open up the tubes upstairs to start the damage phase. In order to know which data pads to shoot, we will need the scanner. The scanner buff will always spawn on an enemy in the dark side room when the encounter starts. Defeat this enemy and pick up what it drops to get the scanner buff. Once you have this buff, you'll be able to look down through the glass windows to see the data pads below, and 2 of them will be lit up yellow on the dark side. There's a number of ways to call them out, but I've always numbered them 1 through 5 starting from the operator door. Once you've got the 2 dark side callouts, pass the scanner buff into the terminal so that someone on the light side can grab it and use it to look through the glass on the light side. Again, there will be 2 yellow data pads below on this light side as well. Once the operator below shoots all 4 correct data pads, the tubes above will open up, and the damage phase will start. The person below will need to pass the operator buff up for someone to grab so that the scanner buff can then be passed down to them. Once the person below has scanner, one of these 6 mini tubes right next to the terminal will be glowing yellow, and the corresponding tube above will need to be shot. From the perspective of looking at the terminal, the left side 3 are on the dark side, and the right side 3 will be the light side. so keep that in mind when calling them out. Note for the teams above, not only will you be wanting to shoot the tubes in the order they are called out until they break, but there will also be a constant wave of exploder shanks and other enemies spawning that you will want to keep an eye out for. If you're able to get all 6 tubes broken fast enough, the encounter's over. Otherwise, eventually the tubes above will close, ending the damage phase, and you'll need to repeat everything for a second phase. Since the scanner buff is already on the person below, they can quickly run around the room to scan the 4 total pads after damage phase, while the second operator comes down to let them out of the room. The second operator will then head downstairs to repeat the process of shooting the pads, passing the operator up, getting the scanner set down, and calling out the remaining tubes to be shot. If needed, you do have up to 3 phases and can repeat a third time if needed, but that honestly shouldn't be a common occurrence. Encounter 2 is fighting Atrax. This encounter involves fighting against 8 duplications of Atrax, figuring which one is the real Atrax and whittling his health bar down round over round until he's defeated. There are 2 floors to this encounter, the bottom floor that you start on, and the space station floor, which you can reach by using the 4 drop pods located at the back of the room. These drop pods will allow you to shuttle yourself up to the space station and back down as needed. To start the encounter, go up near the purple ball in the center of the room. There will be 3 main roles in this encounter: the top scanner, the bottom scanner, and the operator. The top scanner and 1 other person should take the drop pods to go up to the space station, while the other 4 guardians stay on the bottom floor. On both floors, there will be 4 Atrax replications that you will want to avoid for now, along with some sporadic enemies. After a bit, there will be 3 servitors that spawn on the bottom floor, 1 on each side of the room. Alongside these servitors will be an enemy with the operator buff on its head. Defeat it and pick up the buff like last encounter to get the operator buff yourself. This player should then head upstairs to the space station as well after acquiring the operator buff, while the other 3 players can just chill and take down any remaining non-boss enemies that may be around. Once you make it upstairs as the operator, make sure to shoot down the drop pods back downstairs by shooting the data pads next to each one that is currently up top. This space station area will be very similar as down below. Defeat some sporadic adds until the 3 servitors come out. As before, one of these servitors will spawn with an additional enemy with a buff, this time the scanner buff. Make sure that the top scanner picks up this buff after defeating the enemy, and I'd also recommend keeping 1 servitor alive until everyone's ready. This is because once the final servitor is defeated, the damage phase will immediately start. One of the 4 Atrax replications in the space station will glow yellow, signifying the correct replication to damage for whoever has the scanner buff. Immediately call out and move towards that Atrax. Do a quick countdown for when to start damage, and get whatever damage you can off in the few seconds of DPS that you have. There's 2 important things to happen next. First, make sure the scanner uses the nearest terminal to pass the scanner buff down to the bottom team scanner, as they will be doing the exact same DPS mechanic next, with one of their 4 Atraxes glowing yellow. Second, the Atrax replication will disintegrate into one of the same purple balls you saw at the start of the encounter. Whoever picks up this ball will need to go with the operator to one of the rooms on the sides of the space station. Next to each of these rooms is a data pad that the operator can shoot in order to open the door. Once this door is open, the person with the replication can head inside, have the operator shoot the ball off of your head, and then come back out. This will shoot the replication out into space, preventing the replication from respawning, which would then wipe the team. Note that from the timer of the replication respawning, which will wipe you if it does happen, starts from the time the purple ball is spawned, and not from the time you pick it up. So be sure to pick it up and take it to a side room quickly. One tip though if things get behind is that the operator can actually shoot the ball off of the carrier's head at any time, which will fully reset the timer and can then be picked up again and brought to the room as needed, or even just never brought to a room if constantly reset. And this mechanic is actually how the challenge for this encounter is done. After the bottom team does their DPS phase, pass the scanner buff back up to the top team, and make sure the person with the replication takes a drop pod back up in order to get rid of it in one of the side rooms as with the first replication. You will not be able to use the same room as the first time, but can use any of the remaining 3 rooms. You will have 2 more damage phases, one up top and one down below. If at any point during any of these 4 total damage phases you are able to push Atrax to final stand, all 8 Atrax will teleport up top to the space station, and all Guardians should make their way up there as well. As before, one of these 8 Atrax will glow yellow for the scanner, call out and move to that Atrax to do damage to try to take the remaining health down. If you don't finish him, another of the 7 Atraxes will glow yellow, so move quickly to that one to continue until Atrax is fully defeated. If you aren't able to push to final stand in the 4 damage windows, that's okay too. The encounter will basically reset with all Atrax respawning but not killing you, the adds and servitors will eventually respawn, and the damage phase will again start up top in the space station after the final servitor is defeated, just like in the first round. Either way, once Atrax is defeated, enjoy the loot. The third encounter is the Descent. This is one of the most fun and hectic encounters in my opinion, with a lot of room for everyone to get involved, as well as tons of adds to slay out. Here, the space station will be crashing down to Europa while you and your team try to safely discard nuclear cores that will be spawning. When the encounter starts, adds will start pouring in throughout the room, with 3 special buff adds just like we've seen in the first 2 encounters. The scanner and operator will again be present in this encounter, but we'll be adding the suppressor buff for the final 2 encounters as well. Make sure all 3 buffs are picked up, and eventually there will be an alarm sound going off, signifying the start of the first round. There's also a message in the feed that says several nuclear cores begin charging that signifies this as well. Each role will have something important to do at this point. Starting with the operator, they will need to check the nuclear core spawners located throughout the room. There are 4 of these spawners, and 3 of them will be glowing yellow inside where the nuclear core is starting to charge. By shooting the datapad next to one of these 3, it will stop that core from spawning, and immediately spawn the other 2. Do note that shooting the datapad next to the single spawner that is not glowing yellow will do nothing, so make sure to shoot a datapad next to a spawner that is glowing. The other 2 nuclear cores that spawn need to be picked up within 10 seconds, otherwise they will explode and wipe the team. Once picked up, those cores need to be brought and deposited into the deposit boxes in the front of the room. In order to know which deposit box to dunk in, it will be the scanner's job to look at the boxes and call out which 2 boxes are glowing yellow. Finally, these boxes will be offline unless the suppressor is done with their job. As soon as the cores start to charge, the suppressor should already be prepared underneath one of the 3 droids around the room. When the round starts, each of these droids will get a small control point circle underneath them. By standing in this circle, you'll get suppression rounds as the suppressor, and when shooting the boss from each spot, you will suppress the boss, opening the deposit boxes so that the cores can be deposited. The suppressor and scanner should do their jobs ASAP, but the operator taking a few seconds to shoot their datapad can be beneficial as it gives the suppressor a bit of a head start. This is helpful as when holding the nuclear cores, you will get stacks of radiation, which if that hits 10, you will die and drop the nuclear core. So making sure that the suppressor stuns quickly so that the cores can immediately be deposited when the core runners get to their respective deposit boxes is extremely beneficial. You'll need to repeat this process for 6 rounds for a total of 12 nuclear core dunks. The only additional thing to think about is that one person will get their buff deactivated, with the buff changing to deactivated augment after every round. This person will need to deposit their buff in one of the terminals in the room, and someone new without a buff will need to pick it up, as they will get a lockout timer from being able to pick up any buffs. Other than that, after the 6th round of nuclear cores have been deposited, the trapdoor in the middle of the room will open. Run through the hallway in front of you to the safe room at the far end of the hall before the door closes in order to survive and complete the encounter. The final encounter is fighting Taniks directly, now in Shank form. This encounter is going to take a lot of similar mechanics from the last encounter, but now incorporating them into a boss fight. Split your team into 3 groups of 2. 2 near spawn, 2 to the far left, and 2 to the far right near the door where you first enter in before the first encounter. After defeating a few waves of enemies, each of these sides will have one of the special enemies with buff spawn, with the operator at spawn side, the scanner on the left side, and the suppressor at the door side. Around this time, the boss should move towards one of the 3 teams and start its missile attack. You'll want to avoid these missiles while also breaking each of its 4 wings as fast as possible. Breaking each wing will spawn a nuclear core beneath Taniks, and breaking all 4 will also stop the missile attacks, so the faster, the better. These nuclear cores have the same mechanics from last encounter. You'll have 10 seconds to pick it up once it hits the ground, you'll need to bring them to the deposit boxes around the map, and you need to deposit them before your radiation hits 10. Everyone other than the suppressor and operator should pick up a nuclear core before they explode. There are 6 deposit boxes in this encounter, with 2 near each section where you were killing adds, and you actually don't need any callouts from the scanner to know where to dunk. Wherever the boss is nearest, for example if it's nearest the spawn area, that means you will want to bring the cores to the 4 boxes that are not the 2 by spawn. As with last encounter, you also cannot dunk 2 cores in the same deposit box, so just make sure each person with a core goes to a different box. While this is going on, the suppressor will be looking to stun Taniks using the same mechanic as last encounter. There will be 3 droids around whatever side Taniks is on, and you'll need to shoot him from underneath each droid in order to suppress him and open the deposit boxes. Do note that there are separate droids on each corner of the map, but you will only use the 3 that are directly next to Taniks based on what side he moves to in order to get the boxes to open. The operator will want to have an angle to see all 4 players as they move to their boxes, because one person with a core will get randomly detained after a few seconds. Shoot one of the glowy spots on the detainment bubble to break them out as quick as you can. Depending on how fast your suppressor stuns, there will usually be 1 or 2 detains per round, but the detains can and will keep coming until the boss is suppressed. Do also note that when the boss is suppressed, one player will get deactivated augment just like last encounter, so I'd recommend that player deposit the buff in one of the terminals before damage phase so that they can grab it again after if a second phase is needed. After all 4 cores have been dunked, it will be damage phase. Group up near the pile of debris by spawn side and wait for Taniks to come back to the middle and spawn its bubble. There are 2 parts to this bubble. The outer ring has a spinning pile of trash that you need to jump over or otherwise get past. Otherwise it will most likely kill you if it hits you. And there is also a lightning circle around Taniks which will damage you and also kill you if stood in for more than a few seconds. Therefore, you will want to stand between these 2 circles in order to do damage. Do also note that you need to be inside the bubble to do damage at all, so you can't just stand outside of it to safely do damage. After a bit of time, Taniks will charge up and launch you out of the bubble. Quickly jump back in to do a second round of damage. Taniks will then charge up to launch you out a second time. As long as you got all 4 cores deposited in one round, there are actually ways to do this encounter with less, but I wouldn't recommend them. You will now have a chance to do a third round of damage. After this round of damage is over, the encounter will reset from the top, and you'll need to do everything over again in order to get another DPS phase if you weren't able to reach Final Stand. Whenever you do reach Final Stand, whether it be in the first or second damage phase, Taniks will start to teleport to the 3 corners of the room while doing its purple missile attack from the sky. Avoid the purple missiles just like earlier while continuing to do damage until Taniks is defeated. That's all for my guide to the Deep Stone Crypt raid. As mentioned earlier, this raid has some of the best loot in the game, so don't miss out. And don't forget that I do raid helps on my stream quite often, and we'd love to have you if you have a willingness to learn. Thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.